All right, I'm gonna pause the recording for a second.
Hello, how are y'all? Zoom record. All right, we're good to go. Welcome everyone to St. Agnes Green Infrastructure stakeholder meeting. My name is Matt Pennington. I'm a consultant for Downstream Strategies. Our headquarters are in Morgantown, West Virginia, but we retain an office in the Eastern Panhandle, and it's located in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, which is the office that I manage and work out of. I'm a senior planner with Downstream Strategies. I've been working in water quality, specifically in the Chesapeake Bay in the Eastern Panhandle, West Virginia for well over a decade. And I've been working closely with Shepherdstown on this particular project since 2018. So we'll first hit I always like to let people know who are there. I go over the sort of the 5 W's of, the why, the where, the when, all these things. So you all understand what the purpose of this is. Like, we're not just doing this for, our personal health or lining our own, wealth and pockets, but there was a serious issue in 2018 for those of you who may or may not remember, but this area of the country received an unprecedented amount of rainfall in 2018. In fact, in some areas received over 300% more precipitation that calendar year than in the history of actual weather collection. So when the rain falls, it has to go somewhere, right? It all depends on what it hits when it falls. If it hits a rooftop or it hits a parking lot, it's typically going to not be able to be soaked into the ground. It's going to, what we call runoff, and it's going to flow to the lowest possible spot. If it does hit a forest or a garden or a residential lawn, some of that will get soaked up into the ground, and that percentage is based on the types of soils that you have. You could have really sandy soils, or you could have really clay-based soils or shale-based soils. And I like to use an analogy that if you're at the beach and you drop your drink in the sand, it just sort of absorbs right into the soil, right? Maybe you've been in an area that has a lot of shale, and you tip a bucket of water over, it just kind of puddles there and slowly falls off. So that's just some basic soil analysis for how stormwater and runoff really does start to contribute, and also is the rooftops and pavement, which we call impervious. So in 2018, Shepherdstown was flooded frequently. There were standard water in different areas of town, as well as within the entire county, had areas of water there for weeks at a time. And so it motivated some of the town residents as property owners and town council to see what sort of solutions could be incorporated to reduce that. I like to use green infrastructure as a means of managing stormwater because it combines, it uses a lot of nature, which is really nicely and well received when you're doing sort of retrofits. It's not big pipes and big ponds and big infrastructure in your small historic community, but it's sort of emulates what you already have a lot of around, which is a lot of trees, a lot of flowers, a lot of vegetation. But most importantly, it uses that really soft soil that I talked about that's able to capture and absorb that flood water before it has a chance to get out and cause damages to nearby homes and businesses. So that's sort of why we're here, is to mitigate some of the flooding that was realized. This is a historic community. Predates the signing of the Declaration of Independence, which means they probably didn't have as strong storms back then. They may have. I'm not sure when they started collecting the weather data in the United States, but arguably there is data that's evidence that's showing that there are more stronger storms now than there were 10, 20, 30 years ago. But your historic community might not have the appropriate level of stormwater infrastructure in place that it needs to manage this on a year-to-year, month-to-month basis. So again, green infrastructure comes into play by incorporating these subtle practices that are easy on the eyes, that really do work really strongly underground to help capture and manage those stormwater flows. The second portion of why we're here is you are one community within a 64,000 square mile watershed known as the Chesapeake Bay watershed. Chesapeake Bay has been is in violation of the Clean Water Act. And the Clean Water Act is a federal law that promises that every American will have clean water to swim in, to drink from, and to fish in. It's basically all the law says. The EPA is charged with coming up with standards, requirements, and using science as well as talking with health officials to figure out what those thresholds are to say that this water is safe enough to swim in, drink from, or fish in. These standards go back and forth depending on what the current administration is and who's in charge at the time, but as well as what current scientific and health findings are from various studies. Chesapeake Bay is not within those compliance issues and is therefore put on the bad list, so to speak. And they call it a total maximum daily load, which basically says that that body of water is impaired and needs to be improved. And so Congress, as passing a law, some people may call it an unfunded mandate, but there is significant funding that goes to modifying and improving the Chesapeake Bay watershed, and which is why I'm standing here today. There was a grant written by the town and is funded by the Chesapeake Bay Trust, as well as the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection, the main funding partner being the Environmental Protection Agency, allocated a small grant to do conceptual green infrastructure design practices to reduce the amount of pollution that's entering into town run or the Potomac River that ultimately flows into the Chesapeake Bay. So any questions on why we're here? So 1, reduce flooding. 2, to clean up pollution entering into the Potomac and Chesapeake Bay. All right, so the where. Well, St. Agnes is the where, and the who is all of its parishioners and the members of the community of Shepherdstown who live downstream of the discharge area of the large stormwater pond. You all have about a 10-acre campus, give or take a couple acres, large amount of impervious surface. Can anyone tell me what some of that impervious surface would be on your campus?
Parking lot.
The roof and parking lots.
Roof and parking lots, that's right. Thank you, Greg. So any hard surface that water can't really soak into, it's called an impervious surface. And it's not necessarily the enemy of stormwater, it's just the enemy of groundwater. So it can't really soak in there, and it has to go, like I said earlier, it has to go downstream, which unfortunately is some of these historic properties and adjacent neighbors of the campus. So that's the where. Went over the why. Then we went over the who. The when was 2018 to really the present. We're consistently trying to manage stormwater. We can't control the weather, so we have to control what happens after it rains, right? And that's what stormwater management. Oh yes, thank you, Robin. We have another visitor. Hi, Robin, thanks for joining. So we went over the when, and finally, we're going to talk about the what, right? And what is the green infrastructure aspect? So now that you have a good background of Chesapeake Bay, stormwater issue in Shepherdstown, and how we're gonna try to mitigate it. Introduce myself there. So I always like to start this off because we're talking green infrastructure, okay? It's not gray infrastructure, and it's not necessarily alternative energy. It's not solar panels and windmills. Green infrastructure is green because it's the color green. It's leaves, it's plants, and it's what the foundation of those need, which is good soil, right? And that's basically what green infrastructure is. But infrastructure as a whole are basically the systems that we put in place for civilization. We have roads system to get from point A to point B. We have a water system that can give us clean, healthy, unpolluted drinking water, so we don't have, major pandemics and outbreaks from cholera and everything else that goes along with history. Sanitation kind of goes along with the drinking water, right? We kind of have to have clean ways to clean and dispose properly of human waste, so we don't get sick. We have telecommunications, we have electricity. All of these things we use for modern societies to increase our health and wellness in a highly dense civilization. And really, green infrastructure is just a newer form of this type of infrastructure that's constantly evolving as our as the human race continuously evolves. As I said earlier, it's just the color green. We use leaves, we use roots, and we use good soil to capture and sink the water into the water table below, instead of capturing it like the parking lot and the roofs of those impervious surfaces, like Greg mentioned earlier, and just allowing it to wash into the closest possible spot, get off our property. Here's a good example of the difference between green infrastructure and gray infrastructure. Both of these practices are essentially doing the same thing, which is one is to convey water from point A to point B. One does it in a more natural way, and one does it in a little bit more of a hardened way. I always like to do this with students. I say, which one is probably flowing faster? The one on the right or the one on the Go for it. And anyone can really respond. I'm not looking. Greg, you already went.
Right.
All right, exactly. It's basically just like an ice rink for water to flow through it, where the one on the left has all of these different roots and stems and probably undulations and rocks and different things that can kind of get caught on and bumped up against, but also more importantly, those roots that just really take it in and absorb it at the same time. So I like green infrastructure because not only does it look good, and not only does it absorb stormwater, and we could argue which one looks better too. I mean, you all might have an opinion, but I kind of like the one on the left. Not only does it look good and it functions incredibly well, but it also has a number of other social and co-benefits that can benefit a community. And I like to show this picture because I don't know about you, but I got 2 kids, I got a house to take care of, and I got a full-time job. And sometimes I like to have fun too. I mean, whenever there's time for that. So everyone's got a lot of balls in the air, right? We got family commitments, we got work commitments, we got, volunteering that we have to be involved in. So we're always looking for something that can help us manage all these balls in the air. And I think for a town and for a municipality, I really like green infrastructure because it allows the town to kind of function with these co-benefits and cover a lot of bases with just a couple simple small elements. So today we're talking about managing flood risks. So here's some pictures from 2018. This one's from the Opequon Creek. That's the historic stone bridge, Van Meter Bridge. Just incredible amounts of water, just nowhere for the water to soak into. Too much impervious surface, crazy amounts of rain happening in that calendar year. But using leaves, using vegetation, just kind of come with me and kind of close your eyes for a minute. Have you ever been through a walk through the forest after a rainstorm and you brush up against a tree or a shrub or a bush and your entire right side of your arm gets saturated after you scrape by it? That's because all of that captures, all of those leaves, all of those twigs, all those branches capture the first 3/4 of an inch of rain. It's a pretty good amount when you consider that 90% of our rainstorms in this area, 90%, 9 out of 10, are 1 inch of rain or less within a 24-hour period. That means if you plant a tree, you're capturing 75% of that rain for 90% of the storms. That's a good rate on your investment there, or return on your investment for that piece of infrastructure. And when you think about it, when you stand under a tree when it rains, you just get these little drops of water that come down periodically, almost like just this natural umbrella that acts as a canopy to intercept that water before it ever touches the ground. It could be a parking lot underneath that tree. It could be a house underneath that tree. But the important part is the water never even gets a chance to become runoff or become floodwater. So green infrastructure is a great way to manage flooding. But more specifically, I like to use trees as sort of the symbol of green infrastructure because they're so effective, because they're so time tested, and because they provide such other great values besides just flood protection. In fact, a medium oak tree there over the course of a year in the Midwest region, this is a little bit off on us, is about 1,100 gallons per year. It's an incredible amount of water that isn't going into somebody's basement or into someone's business. So again, I like to use trees, use it like a little acronym here, is trapping rain and eliminating excessive stormwater. That's all that is. That's a functioning piece of infrastructure there. You might see, a crabapple tree. I see a piece of stormwater infrastructure. when it's all said and done. And we're really just sort of revisioning what infrastructure can be. You know, some people see cell phone towers, other people say mobile communications. We don't know. Maybe it'll be a billboard next year. You never know. Sorry, I got off there on a little bit of a tangent. So we've been growing trees here for a while. This place is actually in Shepherdstown. I don't know if you know James from Muzzy and Sustainable Solutions, but he and I worked together to grow out some trees. We bought a little sack of sycamore trees. They came in a pack of like 200 in a big paper bag at the post office. And he and I worked on these boxes, and we grew them from about 3 feet tall to, I think the tallest one there was 17 feet tall in a year. That's pretty incredible. So we have the ability to grow these trees at tremendous rates. And if interested, there are all kinds of programs that can put trees all over your campus and throughout the town to help capture some of that stormwater, intercept that stormwater before it has a chance to hit the ground. In fact, there's so much importance on tree canopies that Jefferson County actually has an urban tree canopy plan and goal that they adopted about 10 years ago and are continuing to move forward on. And I hope you all continue to maybe take a look at that and see where the areas of, you know, our county and our town could use more trees. So clean water. Sue, this was something that you really brought up in terms of how green infrastructure can help the town run and keep town run clean. This is the basic sort of biology and cross-section of what a very common and probably one of the most used pieces of green infrastructure for stormwater is. This is what's called a bioretention facility, or some people on the streets call it rain gardens. Everyone never heard that term before? All this is a slight depression or a bowl that allows water to sort of gather in, and then we use a very good mix of sandy, loamy topsoil and compost combined. And what that does, it's like a garden on steroids. This thing just takes in water and it just soaks it up like a sponge. Because again, that analogy back to your summer vacation at the beach, you drop your beverage in there, it just soaks it up like a sponge. And so water will filter or flow off the impervious surface, which is the roadway, and go through some of the curb cuts, or maybe there is a small little inlet there in the sidewalk, and go into the garden area where it soaks up, that soil soaks up the water, and then the roots basically just go to work and just pull off of the saturated soils. Whatever isn't able to be absorbed by the soil or the roots goes into these overflow pipes or percolates into the groundwater below, clean as a whistle. What's nice is that this system here would bypass any stormwater grate that you see in Shepherdstown. So if you were going for a walk and you see one of those grates on the streets and water just pouring right in it, there is zero treatment. Every piece of sediment, every drop of motor oil or gasoline or fertilizer or pesticides or herbicides, anything that could potentially be harmful to a water system is entering right into that stormwater grate. And Sue, where does that stormwater grate usually end up?
In Town Run or the Potomac River?
In Town Run or the Potomac River, which is both sources of drinking water for what town?
Shepherdstown.
Shepherdstown, that's right. So there is value
In
here.
other words, you're going to be drinking it sooner.
Or you're going to have to.
We do treat it before we send it.
And more importantly, who's paying for the treatment of that for safe, potable water? The customers are paying for that. So if we can get more green infrastructure in place in feasible locations that will help protect drinking water sources, this ultimately pays you back in the end. Once again, one of those balls in the air that are juggling from the municipality, but also this is our town. This is what we are trying to achieve, a healthy, beautiful place that's affordable to live in. So we actually did one of these very recently. I might grab a drink of water here while I slide over. Take a trip over to the train station. We removed this sidewalk to nowhere. Anyone remember that thing? Yeah, that's funny. It just went into that brick wall there. But we took that out and we incorporated some large tanks, which we call cisterns or rainwater harvesting. So we gathered all of the rain off of the rooftop, and I think those are, it might be 1,000-gallon tank on both sides. And water slowly through a drip irrigation system pushes out into the rain garden. over here that just constantly absorbs water, and the plants take it up from the soil, and then the sun take it from the plants through a process called evapotranspiration, thus completing the water cycle, and it can continue again. Falls from the clouds, hits the roof, goes into the gutters, into the tank, into the ground, into the plants, back into the sky. And so it's just a constant loop. And we always like to say that the rain never leaves the station. Come on, Sue. All right, I'll get them. I hear you. Now that I know my audience. I'll go for some more cutting humor instead of this gentle stuff. All right. So, all right, this one's for you, Sue. So the tangled root systems ease erosion and sedimentation. So not only did you see in this picture back here, but those roots just grabbing onto that soil, not only do they take it up, but they also hold it in place. So one of the biggest contributors to pollution in the Chesapeake Bay watershed is mud. It's just mud. It's sedimentation. And once that gets mixed into the water, it creates a number of different issues, from poor habitat for species, bugs, fish, other shellfish. But it also has nutrients and other pollutants that have been kind of suppressed within that mud for a long period of time. Any fertilizer, any kind of contaminant that was in that mud gets released once that sedimentation gets in there. But roots are like Velcro for soil. You ever try to like pull up a piece of grass in your yard that you didn't like, or try to, heaven forbid, actually take up a tree? Like that's a lot of work. Those roots are in there, and they hold on, and it's very hard for water to take that soil out if there's a good root system in place. So those were just two of the main factors that we're going to be talking about for Shepherdstown. There's all kinds of different ways we can do this. One is reducing heat and utility costs, strategically planting trees at the St. Agnes campus can shade portions of your building. With that shade, you can reduce some of your utility expenses to cool or even to heat your building. It can also be used as windbreaks as well in the winter months. But here's a shot of what we call urban heat island effect. So in urban areas, or areas that have a lot of impervious surface, can be almost twice as hot as away from the shade of a tree, just in a block by block radius. Or here, this is along the same block. So you've probably felt this before walking along a street on a hot summer day. You go from shade into direct sun, it's incredibly hot. But these temperatures continue throughout the evening, because that impervious surface is able to store that heat all day long. And so, your system, your HVAC system is constantly running. But if you're able to shade your property and keep it a little bit cooler, you might have a lower utility bill in a few years once those trees grow up and become mature. So here's some evidence of number of kilowatt hours. This data is a little bit old, I'm sure. Good old West Virginia Public Service Commission has raised our current rate from 9 cents a kilowatt hour. I think it's now 11 or 12, isn't it? So it's a bit higher. I might need to update this one. Yeah. So, just a small or large, or even a large tree, just in the appropriately placed to give you some afternoon shade, the hottest part of the day, could really save some money on your utility bills long term. So one more for you, Sue. Trees can also be temperature regulating energy efficiency systems. So I did lie earlier. I said that green infrastructure isn't necessarily alternative energy, but it kind of is. It's more of a preemptive solution to energy problems that we see from the peaks and valleys of the season, or the annual seasons. All right. Any questions on the value of green infrastructure, the what of the 5 W's? All right. Everyone feel comfortable to take the next step on what our company's been brought in to do in terms of evaluating St. Agnes's campus on how green infrastructure can benefit? Okay, I'll step on it then, Greg. Megan, I might need to help me. If I stop share and then share again, I can pick candidate sites. Share. So this is not working. I want that one. So just the
Just look
chair?
at- Yeah, you should just. We're gonna need our IT professional.
Had some technical difficulties. Once again. Thank you, Megan.
Yes, thank you.
Not only are you the funder, but you're also our IT expert.
All right, so what are you trying to show?
I'm trying to share candidate sites. Maybe we can see that.
Yeah, it's doing that again. Did it earlier.
Oh, that's great.
You want to do it now?
Why don't you keep going? It likes, it
It likes
responds well.
me.
Yeah, it responds well to you.
Okay. let's
That
go
looks
on.
promising though. I can just do.
Where is it? Working?
Let's try this. There we go.
There it
Okay.
is. I just held my breath.
Thank you, Megan. So we have been, our firm was contracted to help Shepherdstown identify some candidate sites. So please don't feel like we're only doing this for St. Agnes and we're, singling this property out, but your property was of particular interest. And we actually have a standalone task for the campus itself, but we've also identified several other sites that would be good candidate sites within the municipality in an effort to kind of have a robust approach to green infrastructure. And this is all just for your awareness, but we will be diving a little bit deeper into St. Agnes's actual plan here. Let me move forward here. Sorry for making anybody dizzy. So these are some of the techniques there that we're looking at. Okay. There, is that better? All right. So here, so we're looking at the engineered drawings of your campus when it was originally designed, probably about, what was it, 20 years ago? Yes.
Hey, Matt,
Yes.
this is Robin. We can't see what you're displaying for those on the phone.
I'm sorry.
I can see your slide 4, the candidate sites PowerPoint screen.
Sorry, Robin, I will try that again. Does that work?
That works. It's
Okay.
presenter mode, but that's okay.
All right, I hope
That's no problem.
okay, we'll leave it at that because we've had some ghosts in the machine here. So I guess it is Halloween, so no one was for you, Sue. All right, so we took a look at the engineer drawings and we understand a good bit about your campus. Here's the actual church building itself. Sort of polygon shape. And here are your north and south parking lots. Here's your main entrance way. Is everyone kind of oriented and understand what they're looking at there? Yes, you have a question?
No.
Or you're just-
Microphone, I'm hard of hearing.
Oh, okay. But you can hear me okay?
With the microphone.
Oh, wonderful, thank you. So we took a look at the existing design here and we wanted to identify any conflicts where green infrastructure could not go in. So for instance, green infrastructure and underground utilities are kind of like a big X. They don't really blend well together. You got water lines, you got sewer lines, you got electric lines, you got fiber optic lines. Obviously digging a big hole in the ground and planting a bunch of trees, or doing the bioretention that we showed in our earlier creative depression. It's not really appreciated by some of the utilities, right? So we basically identified areas where we couldn't put green infrastructure. It's like, okay, that's not a good spot for it. Next, we had some future expansion that the church had on the plans. We're not sure if, when, how, et cetera, going to go in, but we knew that there was going to be the potential of some expansion here, potentially up here, and potentially over here. If, when, we're not really sure. There's actually even an entryway over here that's kind of sketched out on plans. to be determined, but we don't want to put something in the ground and then have to rip it back up at a later date. Obviously, trees can probably kind of be the exception of the rule there, because it's pretty easy to pick up a tree. We do it with tree spades all the time. And put it be. So those were sort of the things to consider of conflicts and complications. And really the solutions that we're looking for. One, we already explained earlier, which is why we got brought in, which was to reduce downstream flooding. But two was something that we didn't really know until we went out and visited the site, which was the sort of underperforming stormwater pond in the center that was originally intended to be, you know, wet pond with a fountain. And there just hasn't been enough water in that facility to have that ever become achieved as a wet pond with a fountain. And it's kind of now a marsh type setting with some cattails and other invasives that are going in there. So that's also a GI solution that we're going to take a look at through this. So let's see here, presenter mode. So really our plan here is threefold. It's pretty, didn't want to get too complicated because I wanted to address this as a sort of phased approach. You know, phase one really works well, and we might not need to move forward with phase two or phase three. Or if phase one is really working well and you really like the look of it and you want to move forward with phase one and phase two, we can do that too. But you know, this is sort of a dip your toe in the water of green infrastructure at the church. And we can kind of choose your own adventure on it as we move forward. But for the most part, it's going to be three aspects of infrastructure. The one is going to be realigning the downspout on the south portion of the building that currently discharges into this PH2, the center pond. There's an underground pipe that connects these downspouts and flows straight to this pond. Well, this pond is getting overloaded during large storms, and it's actually flowing out of that pipe along this alleyway and kind of into some neighboring properties. So the diversion of that yellow dashed line there and realigning that downspout would actually take about half of the entire church building itself offline. So it would flow into an unused depression on the south side of the property that was originally designed to what's called on the plans as a feeder pond. We're not sure what it's feeding because there's never any water in it. So we're going to make the maximum use out of that by collecting some of the water flowing off of the church rooftop and empty it into that pond, into that area for step one. Anyone have any questions on that? So again, this is that yellow is basically all the water that's flowing into the pond right now from the center line of the roof. You see these two arrows that kind of go this way and that way. This is basically saying that any drop of water that flows on this side of the roof goes this way, and any water that lands on this side of the roof goes this way. It enters into these trunk lines from the downspout, flows down here, kicks around, and empties into there. And we're just simply going to be rerouting that entire section of roof. So here it is on the ground. That's basically what it looks like. And we would just be installing probably, I don't have the plans in front of me, but I believe it's either a 4 or an 8 inch, it's probably a 4-inch PVC pipe. You can buy it at Lowe's or Home Depot or your local store. It comes in 20-foot sections and it just pops right on, and we'll just continue to follow grade all the way down the hill and sink it into this depression, which I would recommend be the phase 2 of eliminating the ditch and filling it in with some of that bio mixed material, which is sand, topsoil, and compost, and creating a garden there. Instead of an empty depression or a pit, it'll be a garden full of native flowers and perennials that'll change colors with the season and grow and absorb a lot of storm water that's coming off that pond or off that rooftop. So those examples of some bioretention facilities throughout the seasons. You know, in the wintertime, that wispy grass is usually like a little blue stem, but then we can have other colorful types of species that go in there. We can even plant trees in there if you so choose. If the trees get too big, we can always pop them out and plant them other areas in your campus and replant them with smaller species over time. Samuel, do you have a question?
I do. Could you go back a couple pictures, slides? Yeah, that one. I'm just looking at this. Is the water? It almost looks like the water is just going to flow down into the park into the driveway.
Yeah, you got to imagine that yellow line being underground.
Oh, you're sorry. I thought you were sheet flowing.
Yeah, no, that'll be no. We.
Sorry, I thought you were sheet flowing it from the building all the way down.
Yeah, that would be a subterranean 4-inch PVC pipe that'll be constructed on grade, probably at a 1% slope from the downspout all the way into that basin.
Gotcha.
And there is, if you look at the plans and the contours there is just enough there to do that. I don't know how good anyone here is reading contours, but it's flat, but it's doable. The good news is that we'll have about 30 feet of head pushing from the top of the roof onto that pipe, so it'll get there one way or another. We can even make that pipe perforated, so if it does sit in there for a long period of time, it'll just seep out into the ground, become groundwater, be a very small amount. Okay, so that's basically what that basin, that depression, that pit on the south side of the property could be backfilled in. If you see that picture on top left, it's sort of that really rich soil and loamy soil, and we'll mulch over it and create a little garden there for visitors. I know you have your community picnic out there towards the end of the summertime. Just be a place to kind of hang out, hopefully provide some shade, and just be a point of interest instead of point of liability for someone falling in it, chasing a soccer ball or a frisbee or something. This is kind of a representation of how much would be taken offline once we connect that downspout and realign it over to that other southern pond. So you probably about 1/3 of the total drainage area would be relieved off of that central stormwater pond. The second solution here is to address that central stormwater pond here at phase 2. So if you're happy, let's go back. So if you're happy, if you like to look at the bioretention here and want to incorporate it into your phase 2, you can do that. If the solution of taking a third of that a third of that rooftop offline and putting it elsewhere doesn't resolve the flooding issues, and we got to take it a step further, this would be my next recommendation, would be to address this area here. This is how it currently looks today. It's a cattail farm. And that's not uncommon. It really does take over. It's very invasive species. You do get some good environmental benefit. There is habitat that's in there for birds, winter birds, and different bugs. You do get stormwater storage, but quite frankly, I don't know if this is what you all intended when you saw the plans for the design. I don't know if this is functioning at the level that you want it to. I mean, this is something that we can take a look at and make some recommendations on. But if you are unpleased with it and want to use this space in a different manner, we can do that. Again, it would be essentially modifying it and converting it over from the picture on the right to sort of this, I call it a stormwater meadow. It would have just similar plants to the bioretention, but it would be lower maintenance, in my opinion. We would still get a lot of treatment out of it for Chesapeake Bay pollutant purposes, but ultimately I think it might be a better fit for St. Agnes and its campus, and it's an option that you might want to consider. This is how that stormwater meadow sort of bioretention would look. It has a lot of natural looking vegetation, it can be sort of wild and native looking. It could even be really close, depending on what, really well maintained, depending on what kind of species you want to put in there. But essentially water flows in, it gets soaked up through that soil, goes down to this gravel bed, and then goes out to a large discharge pipe that you already have in place. And we would just connect into that existing pipe feature that eventually discharges down into the alleyway on the north end of your property. But that's, again, sort of the anatomy and the cross section of a bioretention facility. It's nothing magical. It's just really, really well constructed, well designed soils and plants that are able to soak up water really well and return it back to the sky. Let's see. So the third is the tree planting. So we talked about a healthy tree canopy captures about 3/4 of an inch, or 3/4 of the first inch of rain. You all have a beautiful campus there. You have a lot of young trees there. So obviously you're interested in tree planting. You maintain them incredibly well. I think only I would say probably 90% are growing at expectation. You know, we only have a couple there that are looking like they're a little hurt from different seasonal activities, probably drought. But there isn't any reason why we can't plant more. And if you're interested in planting more, filling in some of these turf areas, it could reduce some of your mowing needs if we set up planting islands with big mulched areas that don't need to be mowed any longer, and have a nice series of trees, either flowering or shade trees, whichever you prefer. The great news is that there's, there's great programs here in West Virginia. This one is a free program that's offered twice a year that provides you everything you need to have a successful tree planting project, volunteer project at your campus. So not only will you be installing trees at your campus location, but you can even offer it as a sort of care for creation program within the church and the archdiocese as a whole. They'll give you all the tree species that's pretty vigorous amount, or a pretty good healthy variety. They'll give you all the stakes, all the mulch. All you need to do is provide the volunteers and the manpower or equipment to dig the holes. And they'll go out there and they'll teach you the correct way to plant trees and how to maintain them over time. And if you do this twice a year, before too long, you'll have your tree canopy will start to get built out, and something you can even track and advertise to your congregation as, you know, hey, this is what we did this year for our, you know, Care for Creation or Earth Day, or whatever you want to market it as or advertise it as to your parishioners. Great program, can't speak enough about it. It's been ongoing for about 10 years. They really know exactly what to do and how to do it and when to do it, and it's pretty seamless. So I would recommend, that'd be my third recommendation, is just to continue to build out your tree canopy. There is one other last phase 4 rain garden. If you really want to, or really into rain gardens and really want to do another one, we can probably fit that in. This was one that we walked the campus and saw it coming down from the New Street entrance. And it's just past that first parking lot on the right, but there is a bit of erosion. Some water gets washed out there. This is sort of a rudimentary looking way of how that could look. But essentially, if I understand it, water's coming down there and really just sort of filling into this flat area, maybe ponding a little bit in and around that discharge pipe. You could effectively incorporate a bioswale, which is basically just a straight bioretention facility that conveys water. Again, it'll just sort of hit those stems, those rocks, that soil, and just get absorbed up along the way. And look a little bit different than sort of the monoculture of just green grass, but have some color viewpoints and points of interest. The other thing is you could, again, just continue to plant trees. Roots really soak up a lot of water. So if you do have standing water in that area that kind of sits for a couple of days, you know, plant a couple sycamores in there, plant a couple swamp white oaks that really just grow fast and soak up water really well. And that should probably take care of your problem. But again, I would put this one as probably the lowest or the least like effective out of all of them. It'll work, don't get me wrong, but it's kind of a stretch. But it's something that you could do if you really like rain gardens and aren't seeing the effects of the first two recommendations on your campus. Now that you have absorbed that, just like a rain garden absorbs water, any questions for me or ideas?
I think in the original design, the site designer had in mind was an understanding, I think a misplaced understanding of how to develop on karst soil. And which, you know, the whole county is karst.
Mm-hmm.
And the concern that he had was that he didn't want any water to infiltrate into the karst.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so he's, you know, lined the stormwater facility with 2 foot of clay to prevent that on both of them, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's better understood now, and that, you know, that can be I think it can be positive if you're not in a, what they call a pollution hotspot, to actually encourage infiltration in, and I would like to seriously consider that for modifying the pond to do that, which would mean taking out some, doesn't have to be all, but, scrape out some of that clay liner and replace it with the kind of growth media you're talking about. Basically, that's what we did at Shepherd Village. with
Sure.
the pond there. I'm concerned that if we're just adding material above that, above the existing clay, we're actually decreasing the amount of volume that's available for retention.
Mhm.
Now, quite frankly, that's already happening because of the because of all the vegetation that's growing in there too. So so I don't know but in order to prevent that, we need to, to have the pond actually drain so that it is normally not wet, because if it's wet, it's going to develop more cattails. They like to grow there. So I think we'll need to think about how to, after the event, how to make sure that the water either infiltrates or discharges. The discharge line from that pond is actually set pretty high
Mhm.
in order to keep it a wet pond. So we have to deal with that problem,
Yeah, and that's why it's phase two. One thing, Greg, is you're right. We would eliminate, by putting that soil retention, we'd eliminate a decent amount of volume, but we're also taking a third of it offline by dumping it into the top pond. These still retain and absorb quite a bit of water. It's usually like on the gravel bed, it's about 40%. So as it's right now, if you imagine, it's just a big void, right? A big empty box, right? That's 100% in the box. You put a layer of that gravel on there, that gravel will take up 40%. Like there's all the water fills in the voids of the gravel. So if you filled that same box that was once 100% with gravel, it's only 40% of that water. And then the soil itself, that biomix, is about 25% saturation point. So it has voids, it's able to absorb. I think what's interesting right now, Greg, is like if you drain the pond, right? So since it's a wet pond, right, there's no storage on there at all right now, right? Whatever goes in hits that top of that existing water surface elevation and flows out.
Right.
So if we drain it, we're going to be getting a little bit more of that line back because there's no longer water in it.
Right.
And we just put soil back in where there once was water.
Yeah, okay.
And so it would have to be looked at. It would be more of an engineered solution, whereas phase one, all we're doing is just running a pipe.
Yeah. And I agree with you.
Yeah, I don't think.
I think in phase two, we have to kind of repeat the runoff calculations to make sure that what we're talking about still meets the
Yep.
objective that we're talking about.
Yeah,
Which I don't
absolutely.
think it does not. Yeah, I think that we need to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I would be comfortable recommending that you could build phase one today without any engineering, because they've already set you up. They've already dug you the hole.
Right.
All you got to do is just put in the material, and any plumber or excavator could put you probably 120 feet, 150 feet of PVC pipe and disconnect it. As long as they had a level, you'd be fine. And a backhoe.
Just have to open that gate.
Yep. And so I don't even think you would need engineering on that, but we could talk it over with a few other folks from the county, and I bet they would probably concur. But phase two, most certainly, because you're talking about modifying an existing steel drawing with something that wasn't intended. But I do think it can be done. And I think it's an area of displeasure. It seems like it might be an area of displeasure for how it turned out, that this isn't exactly what we were thinking.
Thank you.
what percentage did you say, phase one would divert, you feel?
It would definitely divert half of your rooftop.
Half the rooftop.
Half the rooftop.
That I understand, but
I can't give you an exact percentage, but I can calculate it for you and send it back to you,
I
Mike.
was just curious how much of the total it would.
Let's see, where was that? My ballpark was, like, you're not gonna get all of that yellow because there's some coming from the parking lot and going into that inlet.
Right, that was where I was coming from.
Yeah.
The impact of the parking lot.
Oh, I think right now we just leave it as is. Let's just see how phase one works. And if it's working well, move on. But no sense, breaking a whole lot of eggs right now, making a mess of the place. I think phase one would be a very, you always hear politicians, we're going to go with a scalpel, not a sledgehammer, right? And it's like, I think this would be a very scalpeled approach to diverting a large percentage of water that's currently flowing to that stormwater pond and help out those downstream properties.
Yeah, and make use of that opportunity.
Mhm.
Any idea how much it would cost to do phase one? I'm
Oh,
also on the
let's see, what,
Finance committee, I should disclose.
I mean, I think I don't know. I feel like we could look up what Lowe's is selling PVC pipe for a foot.
Probably digging the hole is the
Uh,
most expensive.
You know what? Just installation is covered in the cost. Let's see.
Are you going to discuss the cost of these projects?
In the report. So it looks like $2 a foot, and multiply that by 2 for construction cost and labor. So you're looking at $4 a foot.
But that's, you
For the
have to
pipe.
rent the equipment to,
Typically, most contractors, they just double the cost of materials. If
Then you have
a
to
greedy
gravel.
contractor will triple the cost of materials, and that's pretty much a close
We're
back to
talking
$4 to $6 a foot.
fairly modest amount.
$4,000 to $6,000 for the materials. What about the plantings?
I'm sorry, $4 to $6 a linear foot.
But what about the plantings?
So the planting for something along that line, we're looking at usually that's on a square foot level. So
What's a big area long?
let's get one there. I'd probably say that the biopond there would, with labor, you don't have any excavation, which is good because it's already excavated. So you're just giving materials.
You're just laying the gravel
You're
on
just
top?
laying
There's
the-
no swale?
Nope. You're just laying the gravel and the
What
soil on
about
top.
the amended soil to make it absorb? You're not
Yes, so
putting-
that's typically a little bit more expensive. Ballpark, I'd probably say like around
But
$10,000.
the amended soil goes under the gravel?
Nope, goes on top. Let me bring you back there on Zoom.
You mentioned sycamore trees several times. Any particular reason?
They like water and they grow fast.
I'm sorry, I failed you.
Oh, so sycamore trees, we always say they like wet feet. They love to be in water. So anywhere you have standing water, I would recommend planting a sycamore tree because they like to suck it up and they like to grow fast.
So
I would have a serious problem with sycamore trees.
Oh, you don't like sycamore trees?
I love sycamore trees. I know that they really don't grow that deeply, and they are rather quick to tumble over.
Okay. Well, there's a number of other I call them riparian trees.
And I would like for you to, as you write your report, I talk about it to think of some of the other trees, because we are a generation, I'll say, of people who like to follow recommendations of experts. And I have problems with lots of things. Experts is one of them.
Good thing I'm not one of them.
The bottom line is that all these recommendations you make, whether it's to St. Agnes or other areas in town, is that each entity that you make recommendations to has to absorb the cost.
Potentially, if you
Okay?
so choose.
And then the maintenance, long-term maintenance is up to each entity.
Correct.
Because that's a ongoing process, and we have a columbarium garden, which are all native plants. So that takes constant upkeep because native plants spread. So there's constant management of these areas.
That's true.
So it's going to be a long-term management commitment, no matter what we put in where, whatever phases we agree to.
That's correct. Yep, everything is a maintenance commitment.
But it might be easier to maintain than what we got.
I can't hear.
It might be easier to maintain than what we've got.
Easier to maintain the one we've got.
Than what we've got.
Well, in some respects, but, all of us know what happens to, native plants and anything that grows, it doesn't keep contained. So, there will be ongoing maintenance issues that have to be figured into anything that we decide to do. It's not a one-time, let's put it in, it looks nice right now, but 5 years from now, it's gonna be everywhere. So it's an ongoing, and we have to have a commitment from people, you know, who's gonna do this, who's gonna carry it on? But I'm just looking down the line, all of these are excellent. You know, I'm a tree hugger, I love the idea of the trees, all of these are excellent, I'm just real excited about it. But I'm also realistic to know, that it's long-term care.
So with that said, in terms of installation, I don't want to overpromise, but there are opportunities available for faith-based organizations to apply for funds, for grants. Again, EPA, DEP, Chesapeake Bay Trust, all I think have our faith-based organizations are eligible applicants for various grants. And I don't want to say your future is reliant upon a grant because that's always like, a long-term retirement plan based on winning the lottery. But for the most part, those are opportunities are out there to help. I mentioned the trees, that's a grant but it's something that's been active around here for 10, 15 years. And I personally have been awarded the grant almost every time I've written it. So there are, we try to point you in the right direction. If you're interested in taking this step and getting out there, we can help you identify, what's a feasible grant, what's probably what I call go or no go decisions. It's like you have a really good chance of winning this. But that said, there are no guarantees, but you do have the intellectual property of the application, and you can submit it again the following year, or potentially use some of that for another grant. So, but with that said, I still have never found 2 grants in my entire career. One for maintenance, and the other 2 for equipment. So one day there'll be a maintenance grant out there, but today, no. I mean, everything takes maintenance, whether it's your marriage or a pair of shoes. You got to continuously maintain this thing. Nothing lasts forever. You got to work on it.
Matt, what will be the next step?
Well, I think right now, with this said, you have a number of people that would love to share this presentation with. I think I should get in front of this. So. All right, for those of you who are still on the Zoom and viewing the recording, the question was, what will be the next step? At this point, I feel like this is yours. These are some recommendations that I foresee that are within reach and cost feasible. Please comment by your administrator at St. Agnes is going to share this with you. Please send any comments or ideas back to the St. Agnes administrator, and then they will filter them out to me, and we can adjust as needed, and then we will deliver the final plan and recommendations that include cost estimates.
So you need the information from them before you prepare your report.
Yes, this is all part of sort of
I just
this.
want to make that clear before,
Mhm.
if they're expecting your report, then they need to get it. So you can prepare.
Yep. The administrator of St. Agnes, Beth, and I have discussed that, and we're looking at a couple weeks. With the understanding that the holidays are coming up, maybe before the end of the year, we'll have those recommendations back.
Okay, so you're looking for, when are you looking for feedback from us?
That is up to whatever you in your archdiocese and.
What is your deadline?
I don't have a deadline. I don't have a deadline for you. You are,
Okay, so in other words, is there a chance to send you input in the next week or two that might, influence what you put in the report?
absolutely, for St. Agnes, yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
I mean, is
so
there,
that's 1 or 2 weeks you need.
well, no, wait a second. When is the report you envision for St. for St. Agnes?
This is it.
This, when do you want it, when does it need to be due by?
Yeah, when.
Before the end, before the end of the
For
year.
your contract and the constraints that you have, you know, when were you hoping to write the report?
I'm hoping before the end of the year, but at the same time, I don't want to rush you if your constituents and your parishioners want more time to review this and think about it.
Okay,
I think we can extend because this is important. This is your property. This is something that you all have put an incredible amount of time and dedication in thinking about. And here I am telling you need to change it. So I don't want to force you into something you're not comfortable with. So please take your time and make the best decision on behalf of your church, your community, and do what you think is best. And I'm here to answer any questions and also, you know, work through any ideas that you might have if you think an alternative might be better. I thank you all for coming. I hope you learned something.
How will they get in touch with you? You'll have.
Right now, I believe Beth, are we filtering everything through your office in terms of comment? Yep. If you need to reach me, contact Beth and we'll go through that chain of command.
Thank you all.
All right, have a good rest of your day. It's a wonderful. Oh, and All Saints Day tomorrow. You all having you have a mass tomorrow? 2 of them tomorrow. Okay, great. Thank you all.
Bye.
Oh, how are you?
Thank you.
I met Father Matt.
Yeah, I've been here with he'll be 3 years in June. So, yeah. I'm here to.
You like it?
I did. It's great.
Yeah, this is a nice community. Let me see if I can stop this recording. Sorry.
Maybe.
Absolutely. I hope that this kind of resonated.
Yeah, it's been.